Hello and welcome to Mindfully Gay. I'm Nick, here with John and Jerry. Today, we're focusing on the spiritual fitness and the LGBTQ plus community.
We'll delve into how spirituality intersects with our queer identities and discuss the broader impacts of traditional religious views.
And we're highlighting the transformative power of coming out as a spiritual journey.
With insights from our diverse backgrounds, we aim to enrich your path to spiritual well-being.
Let's dive in.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mindfully Gay podcast. And this is part 3 of our series that we've been doing. So our first series, or first part of the series, was on physical fitness and then mental fitness. And this week we're talking about spiritual fitness. So if you've missed the other 2 episodes, go back and listen to those and you'll be all caught up as we get into this topic today. I know I'm going to talk a little bit about yoga, but I know I want to hand it off to Jerry a bit since you do work that kind of sits in this place of spirituality or a way to enhance kind of spirituality just in the work that you do. Because if I was just listening to this podcast, the question that came up for me was, well, what is spirituality and how do I even practice that or do that, or what does it look like without going to church? I mean, that's
Exactly.
kind of the,
That's
what
exactly
kind of
where I am. Yes.
popped up. So there we are.
How do we do it without church? Definitely.
So I think there's that relationship. I mean, people think like, oh, you go to church to, get the spirit. I don't know.
And then we gays have been told that church is not for us, and so it's a dilemma. Yes, but Jerry has
Do you have the answer?
Jerry has a solution.
I feel the light. Well, I was thinking of spiritual fitness, and I thought, well, if we took our scriptures and we tighten our cord, and we went 1 and 2.
Yes.
Or there's the pew, where you kneel and you get
Kneel,
up to
yeah.
squats.
You do a handstand and hold.
There we go.
We're reading, right?
You have to learn how to incorporate multiple disciplines.
Yeah.
I think it's funny we're laughing at religion, and as a therapist, and definitely as somebody who has kind of helped usher people into a pathway of spirituality, often the obstacle we face up front is spiritual trauma or religious trauma.
Right.
And then I think another concept we should probably chat about is, I call it a spiritual crisis. But I think in Utah in particular, I know that when I have visited with people in California or Colorado or other places around the country, the concept of spirituality is far more palpable and accessible. But here in Utah, it's almost like the religious trauma gets quickly associated to spirituality, and especially in the gay community, there's just complete, like, I want nothing to do with any of it, which is really unfortunate. But when I think of spirituality, when I teach students or other professionals about spirituality, I think about context. So religion is about dogma, doctrine, structure, often obedience, conformity, deference to authority. Spirituality, which is interesting because I think religion is often, not always, but often the worst place to find spirituality. For some people it facilitates a place of belonging, but often that's about compliance. I think spirituality in particular asks the question of each person, like, in the broader context, where do I see myself? In the grand scheme of things, how do I come to bring purpose and meaning and context to my existence? And so in my particular pathway, where Bruce and I have kind of aligned ourselves with a lot of indigenous mentors and teachers and traditions, what's interesting is how a lot of cultures have found ways of creating systems of inclusion within the framework of their cultural understanding. And that cultural understanding is not this compartmentalized approach to life, but that, for instance, in a lot of Native communities, everything is seen through a spiritual context and lens. That tree, the ground, the animals, family members, however they show up, right, is all seen in this grand, like all life is sacred within the wheel. And, right, and so in the context of their culture and in the context of their traditions are these reinforcements about you bring value. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people grow up under that context, which is very different than, in particular, Christian dogma that says your worthiness is dependent on.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right.
And so for me, spirituality, I know there's lots of pathways to spirituality, and I've been involved in some very intense ritual and ceremony where, it's just profound experiences. And yet, I was thinking about this morning. Last summer, Nick and I, as we were getting to know each other, went on this hike and we stopped along a river and we just had a little pipe. Not even a ceremony. We just smoking, sharing, getting to know each other.
Yeah.
And it was a very peaceful thing. It was like the energy of the natural world around us was just kind of holding us in this conversation. And I remember walking away from it thinking, I felt some clearance. I felt some connection. Mm-hmm. And not just to Nick, but even to myself and to everything around me.
Right.
Which was the context that I needed at that moment, which I would have described as very spiritual.
Right.
And I know I've had this experience with you in yoga. And I remember in particular I was practicing Bikram yoga at the time, which is a little bit more, it's this yoga in a hot room. But I remember it really required me to be very focused. And I know whenever I've been in class with you, there's always this contemplative aspect to the practice. I would describe that as spiritual. So part of what I'm saying is hiking, yoga, ritual and ceremony, there's lots of ways of accessing spirituality that doesn't require priesthood.
And it's our physical world, to a degree that we're doing it in. It's a huge shift from this understanding that, for you to be spiritual, you have to adopt this understanding of God and heaven and, live within it. And yeah, it's a big shift. I remember that time with the pipe. I remember feeling nature holding me. It was a beautiful thing, and it's just not what I was taught in seminary for 4 years. But I had to bring this up because it's a weird thing. You're right. I know I speak from a gay person that's an ex-Mormon, and I know that we're all in that place of push it away, get it away, because what it's telling us is that we're wrong and we want to get that out of our lives. But there's also, I know Doug brought this up the other day, I've talked with others that feel the same. There's this weird feeling though of wanting it still. Like it's you're missing something because you don't have that type of connection to the idea of afterlife or whatever it may be. But there is a bit of a void still, and so it's this weird tendency of still kind of wanting, like hearing that the church might be accepting of gays, like in some weird way it sounds good because then we can be a part of it. I know I'm never going to be a part of it. I'm going to be real upset when they finally accept gays because that's so hypocritical from what everyone's gone through. But it's a real dilemma, and I find that definitely the challenges that I find in yoga, or even being in dry sauna or out in nature, it's the stimulus of the outside world, and it's the contemplation inward of it, and that becomes like this spirituality place for me, and it does kind of pacify or fill that void, I guess, that I think that I'm missing from Mormonism.
The word that comes up for me, and you said it, Jerry, is inclusion. That inclusivity.
Definitely.
Like you were saying, like there's, even though you've separated from that religion you grew up with, but there's still a part of you that desires that, but what is it that you really desire?
you're absolutely right.
It's I'm guessing the desire to be included.
That makes
in
sense.
something.
Yeah.
Because when I hear your story about you guys at the pond or the little lake and having a pipe and connecting with each other and nature and this little experience, it feels inclusive.
Sure.
Like everything was embodying everything together. It was together, and I think that's what we might struggle with as gay people too, just not feeling included, whether it's just in regular kind of social and community things, especially in church if you grew up religious or in a religious context. And if you are outside of that, then you do feel lost,
Sure. Left out.
Left
The left
out.
out thing sucks. It sucks to
Right.
feel that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have the 4 agreements on my brain. We just finished our book club.
Yeah.
But here's what I want to propose, right? This place of I want to feel included. It's like it's interesting. I just say I have no interest in being included with Mormonism whatsoever. Not out of a place of anger, but I just recognize that it's a pretty juvenile offering compared to what I have. And so it's not even attractive. It's kind of like, I could go back and take that high school class, or I could take that master's level class, right?
Yeah.
And I always tell people this, I feel like Mormonism opened doors for me, but to go back to Mormonism in my mind would be a
Shutting
regression.
doors. Shutting
Yeah.
doors, yeah.
Kind of going backwards.
But isn't it interesting, I think, in our domestication, especially around Mormonism, right? The indoctrination, the programming, is that there is only one true way.
Yeah.
And it's this place of obedience. And so we energetically align ourselves with that concept and that idea. And so when we give up, it propels us into a place of failure, disappointment. I see this frequently where folks are, and then we scramble for the idea of legitimacy, as if we're going to find it outside of ourselves. And I can't help but to wonder, like what Miguel Ruiz would talk about in the 4 Agreements, is how much of that is how we've been domesticated to conceptualize our values spiritually. And when you think God has rejected you and his one true religion, right, you default is that place of abandonment and hurt.
Right.
And how much more convenient it is to wrap that up in that shroud of anger.
Very true. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it manifests. Yeah, if you have that disconnect and exclusion, what's left as far as kind of that defense mechanism to kind of take care of self, we resort to, depression, isolation, anger, all those things start to manifest and show up, right? Yeah.
And so I feel like I'm talking a lot, but I'll just keep going. You can shut me up. So often when I'm visiting with people who kind of bring this template in, what I experience from them intuitively is I like to think of it as a crisis of spirituality, right? And that is, I've given up on the idea of any grand design or purpose for myself because the one laid out for me was not compatible. So it's, when I often ask people this question about how do you relate to your spirituality or your higher power or whatever that might be, and a lot of people are just kind of blank, which is fine. But if they're unable to really kind of conceptualize any sense of identity or purpose for themselves, then I think, oh, this person's in a bit of a crisis, because what then becomes my catalyst to moving forward in life in any direction? So I would argue that principle is epidemic in our community.
It is.
So much so, right, that this group, we originally started calling it Queer Spirit, And the feedback that we have gotten throughout the years is that people were equating the word spirit with religion
Right.
and wanted no part of it.
Because they'd been burned by it before.
Yeah.
Right.
And they could not open themselves up to contemplate. It's interesting. Mindfulness and mindful seems to have a totally different. It's the same thing, but it's an invitation through a different pathway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it is, it is an invitation to practice, like John has said. It's an invitation to practice purpose. It's an invitation to find and practice purpose, maybe. That's what I'm finding. That's what, me personally, with this group, we were talking today in our training session about, kind of what spirituality is, and you were making a very good point in that it's this area where you feel kind of pushed out from, edged out from, but it's going into that, and it's doing, it's putting yourself into, for me personally, with this group, it's the work that I'm doing that otherwise I would be a reclusive, I'd be afraid to do. And I'm opening up and I'm sharing myself. I'm finding purpose in creating this place that I hope that others come into and start to practice and develop an understanding of purpose that maybe isn't what, and this is what I was trying to say last episode, I wasn't articulating clearly, but it's a sense of self when you're rejected by religion, but then you have to kind of piecemeal together this understanding of what you are as a gay person in the world from what you see on TV, what you see on social media, and of course we have much better examples now than we did 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, whatever, but it's still just an idea of images that you're seeing and you're putting it together, and it's just getting together with a group of people and having some laughs or having some cries. It allows you to practice being who you are as opposed to just looking at these ideas, and maybe you take a selfie and you're posting and you're hoping you're getting likes about what you're trying to present. But it's different when you can get here and actually practice it with other humans. And I think that's what this group is doing. And I know for me, I've had a tremendous shift. Even while we've been doing these podcasts, the Navajo woman, I keep bringing her up because I related so much with this. She talked about the nature. I think she's in Arizona, and she's listening to the podcast, and she's traumatized by the nature that's surrounding her because it brings her back to memories of her past that was traumatic. And I was having the same issues with looking at these mountains around us, and I'm recently noticing that because my purpose is different, it's not porn, it's just not that anymore. It's something very different. I'm changing people's lives with nutrition and with fitness coaching, and I'm having all these really great conversations, and I'm finding myself looking at the mountains, and I'm losing myself in the beauty. I'm appreciating them more. I have clients that I train up on Foothill, and I have to get on 7200 South, so I'm taking that belt loop up, and it takes me right up to those mountains that my entire life I had traveled because I lived up in Colville, my mom lived down here, my dad lived up in the mountains, and I had to do the drive all the fucking time. But now I'm seeing it differently, and I just really believe that it has so much to do with a better sense of purpose.
It's all about the core.
It is. I have a really strong core now.
I love that about finding your purpose, and there's certainly yogic terms around that too, dharma or karma too. Dharma is, what's your purpose in life? Why are you here? And something that you said about kind of in indigenous cultures where, culture and relationship with each other and nature, the foundation is spirituality. It's everything that you do in that context is ingrained in that aspect. Everything is spiritual, and that connection. And so it's, I would guess it's probably a little easier to connect with what your purpose is. But with Dharma, or even just having the experience of, being gay, maybe being ostracized by a church or a religion, or even just by your community, and feeling outside, like, well, what's my purpose? What do I do? Can be very scary, isolating, fearful, and it certainly sucks people into a place of, probably self-harm even.
Depression,
absolutely. Yeah, all of that. But to have that shift like you said, just to get into situations like these little social groups that we're having, our retreats, these game nights, etc., just to have an opportunity to kind of try on, parts of self. Like, I like games, so I'll go to this game night. I like books and reading, I'll go to this book club. And that allows a person, I think, to just kind of show who they really are. And I think from that, and I always use this image, and if you're not watching this, I have my hands in front of my face, and it's just like a veil, a wall that clouds our vision and clarity. And in yoga, I talk about this a lot. And what we do in yoga and breath work and meditation, we're trying to slowly kind of peel away, that veil, pull the curtain open so that you can see clearly, have better clarity. And I think in that practicing, coming to these social events, is just that. It's starting to kind of peel away that curtain.
For sure.
So you can see who you really are. Like, oh, I like this, and I'm connecting with these people.
And not only that, you also get to see other people for who they are, not what you expect they're going to think about you and the freak and all the weird narratives you develop. You actually get to just have words with another human being, and you get to actually see who they are too. And that's the stuff we're doing at game night alone, like just the stupid games we're playing, but it's seeing people get more comfortable, open up more personality come out, everyone's personality's on the table type of thing. And yeah, you can't get that, you can't make that up in your mind by looking at pictures of what gay people are supposed to be like on social media. You've got to get in and do the work, you got to practice.
Yeah.
We had this conversation last night in the book club, and it was very organic and it came out great. I'll see if I can resurrect it here. I was talking to them about these traditions about where many nomadic cultures and indigenous cultures had a very inclusive place for who we would call queer.
Yeah.
And so much so that, like, for instance, in a lot of native communities and tribes, we were seen as unique conduits for prayer, for carrying the prayers of the community to the Creator, because we were seen as these in-between beings. And I brought that into like our present day reality to say, in my experience, and I'm not being critical of straight folks, but the heterosexual community, because they have the majority, have a lot of privilege, where all around them, society is set up to support their narrative.
Yes.
Advertising, everything.
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 To see yourself reflected in society promotes a place of privilege and opportunity. And if you're queer, right, or my question to the group yesterday is, what's the difference from being in the closet? What is the mechanism that invites us to come out? And what I challenged the group is that most gay people or queer folks who are in the closet who come out have to take deliberate action to do that.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Which means, in the lack of privilege, we are in this incubated space in which we are deliberately and intentionally examining the who and what we are, what the consequences might be to come out, right? We strategize and calculate the essence of our existence.
Wow. Yeah.
That is a very powerful process, and I can promise you, as a mental health therapist, it's not one that's always accessible for folks that have a lot of privilege. Right? And we can even look at the race dynamics. We would rather get rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion because we don't want to have those conversations, because privilege allows us to provoke that.
Yeah. Sure.
And it's the same thing. So as a queer folk who is examining this spot, we deliberately and intentionally invent and engineer our life and existence.
Wow.
Take that back to these in-between beings. Right? No wonder they were so powerful in their capacity to reach the Creator. because they're able to approach the Creator from this place of having done that work. They're able to access and connect with nature and spirit in a way that says, I know who I am because I've done the work and engineered that space. And sometimes when I look at some of the challenges in the gay community, I see them as spiritual crisis. Like, we've come out in crisis and there has not been a container or a space to hold or to witness the process.
Right. Right.
Um,
God.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about early communities in the 70s and 80s and 90s, or even before that, right? I mean, even Harry Hay, who started the Managing Society, all that was a group of men coming together
Yep.
and witnessing each other's stories,
Sure.
witnessing and holding the container of who they were.
Oh my gosh. This has just given me a totally different perspective on coming out of the closet. I'm just getting chills. I'm just sitting here in chills thinking about this. Just the way you describe that, what an individual needs to invoke to take that major step and come out, that takes so much internal engineering, as you're saying, to manifest that, to be able to step out. And you're right. Often that's done alone. And to think that someone did that alone, the power that
That's
it took,
tremendous.
the
Tremendous.
courage
You're right.
to do that
Sure.
on your own, and how you even manipulated all of that within yourself, by yourself, to then come out.
To step out into a world that you highly suspect will reject you.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's
oh my
yeah.
gosh.
Yeah.
And then to then not oftentimes be celebrated and accepted on the other side.
Because you don't fit the role of maybe the one type acceptable gay or whatever. Yeah, the
Yeah.
one type of gay that does have a commercial or whatever. Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Well, and so if I've already faced the devil within, bring it on. I know who I am.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's eye-opening for me. And hopefully to our listeners too, who might be struggling with this or even thinking about this. Man.
Give yourself the credit, right? Give yourself the credit for what that work, that labor that you've been in. You're right. It's an internal thing. You're doing it yourself. You're doing it yourself when you have a lot of wounds along the way, and you're finally at a point where you're making a decision to do something. And that is a tremendously powerful thing. You're right. And we don't. You're right, John. I haven't looked at it like that either. I haven't given myself credit. I haven't given others credit like that. And it is a very powerful thing.
Yeah.
And it makes sense to me, as you know, in some indigenous cultures where someone is identified and revered then as, you know, two-spirit, or holds those two seats, right? And then they're celebrated, the power that they have and why they're lifted up. It makes sense to me now.
their ability to access has been exercised, and that's why it was ritualized.
Yeah.
Right. Like, it was a rite of passage. Right. And I, you know, one of the things we'll talk about later is, I think in our next retreat we need to dedicate and create a ritualistic.
Coming up.
Like, let's witness your story, and we're going to put you on the throne that you belong on.
Yes.
We're going to put that crown on, and Queen, you're going to be celebrated.
Absolutely. Oh, I mean, a true coming out party and celebration.
Yeah.
Because we don't get that. We don't get that.
No. I, you know, one thing I was telling Nick, just to kind of take this to another layer. So, and I know our listeners don't all know, but for me, the last couple of years, I've been working out with Nick. I've been working on my nutrition. My partner and I have been doing this together on multiple layers, and it's interesting for me that process. I approached it purely from this physical nutritional kind of a place. I was very cognitive in my head about it. And what happened is it took me to some edges.
Yep.
And because of my spiritual practices, there was this part of me that wanted to like, fuck, I don't want to touch that.
Mm.
And then there was a part of me that thought, okay, lean into this.
Mm-hmm.
Lean into it. What's going on? What's the story you're carrying? And what I found is the stories is where all the weight was. And so I had to like really break a lot of that down. And I think sometimes when we hear people kind of breaking things down, we think, wow, that's heavy lifting. But one thing I was telling him this morning is recognizing those stories and stepping into them. I've come to learn at this point in my life that if I step and press into it, that I liberate.
Yeah, it clears them.
I
Yes,
liberate.
definitely.
Yeah, it clears them is a
Yeah.
great way of saying it.
Yeah.
I liberate something,
Yeah.
and then what I find is my heart goes to this place of a level of gratitude that was elusive.
Mm-hmm.
And I would even argue it then it generates into a space of just love, self-love, love around me,
Yeah.
right? And so I would say this working out, nutrition, new kind of regimen I have in my life, I see it not as a physical process or a cognitive process, but a combination of body, mind, spirit. It has been a spiritual process.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've been discouraged, I go to my ancestors and say, hey, I need some adrenaline. No. Right? But so as we're talking about this thing about fitness,
Yeah.
you know, but it's interesting. I feel like sometimes culturally, broader and even within the gay and queer community, somehow we have to make that kind of inner work sexy or appealing. And I'm not quite sure how we do that, but
Yeah, I hear you.
other than talking about it. But I don't know. Those were some points we wanted to bring up. And so I feel like I've laid the table. Now we're going to deal with it.
Well, just to kind of bring it full circle a little bit, I mean, you're mentioning why we even did this series. You know, we start with physical, mental, we're ending with spiritual. That if someone is curious about kind of this spiritual thing and how do I regain that or even learn about that and experience that, how do I even start? And what we talked about in that first part of the series was, you know, start from a physical place, just like you did, you know, diet, lifting weights, going to the gym. Start with the physical. Same with yoga, it's a physical thing. But things start to shift. Things open up, you know, not only your body changes, but then that changes your mental attitude around it, right? And then something else blossoms, and that's the spiritual connection. And there's a word in yoga for that, and it's tantra. Tantra is that. Tantra is expanding your consciousness and liberating your spirit, liberating your energy.
I thought it was about sex.
I'm glad you said that, because I think that's just like spirituality. We can have that narrow view that's about religion. I think we do that with Tantra, and I know for myself, I've been trying to educate myself about Tantra and expand my horizons around Tantra, because not that it's wrong to think we equate Tantra with sex and sexuality. That's what we've just learned. That's what's
It's the marketing of it.
yeah, that's what's the marketing of it. But if you look at what sexuality is and the expression of it, you can and know the definition of expanding your consciousness and liberating your energy. That's sexy. That's sex. It can be sex, but it's not the only thing. So just to kind of broaden our own perspective around what Tantra is, it's that. And having that experience of just taking, you have one narrow view of something, let's say it's religion or spirituality, and going, maybe there's more.
Yeah.
And you're teaching us that, I just had that revelation of, oh wow, I never thought of it that way. That's expanding your consciousness, your thinking, right?
And it is, so you're right. We start with these physical acts, whether it's nutrition, training, whatever. These are all acts of self-love. These are things that we're taking in as self-love, as opposed to that nauseating narrative that we're telling ourselves that's just negative, negative, negative. You are intimidated by gym space. It's common. Everyone is. What I do for people is I get them ready to get into the gym and use it. They're often very afraid. They think it's not for them because of the narratives they're running in their mind. Now look at you, okay? Those motherfuckers are watching us in the gym. We take up space. We're doing shit that no one else can do. He's got admirers coming to him all the time, telling him that they're noticing his. I mean, no one ever fucking comes to me, but whatever, that's fine. That's fine. But they're coming to him and they're giving him accolades because they see the work that's happening, and it's a huge fucking shift, isn't it? It's the thing that opens you up to be. The negative, the stuff is going away. Pink flamingos are moving in. We're getting to such a different place, Jerry, and it opens up your heart to look at the mountains and think, God, this is beautiful. I'm so grateful, as opposed to fuck this shit. I'm carrying the bag around of look what they did to me. All of a sudden, it's cleared, and we're in a different place. And then this is the act of we put our mask on first, so that we can help others put theirs on with oxygen. Like the what I'm talking about. But.
Did you finish the 4 agreements?
Maybe not. I'm like
for our viewers, let me tell you what
agreements
he
is
missed.
kind of
So at the end of the book,
Yeah.
right? He talks about the 4 agreements, and then like the last 2 chapters are like, how do you apply the 4 agreements? And then there's these 2 prayers at the end. And there's one, it's like the last 9 minutes of the audiobook. It's such a powerful meditation. But the premise that it's built on, we'll do some spiritual gymnastics here, tighten up your core, is Ruiz challenges people to look at and to experience all that is happening to them or that has happened to them through the lens of love.
Wow.
That the narrative and the stories that we carry are usually echoes of the critic or whatever. And what would happen if we experienced the world through that lens of love?
And can I ask you, do you mean it's a shift to understand an appreciation of that critic, an appreciation of all in the past that may be hurt? I mean, is that what you're talking about when we're looking at it through the lens of love? Like, what does that mean exactly?
I think to be able to reach a space of interpersonal liberation that gives you permission to experience love through whatever your existence is.
Got it. Okay.
So I gave this example last night. I had this experience where someone had done Bruce and I really bad. It was a deep, deep betrayal. And my initial reaction to that was anger, betrayal, hurt. I mean, it was crippling, and it was consuming. And the narrative that I kept promoting was, how could they? And what's wrong with them? And lots of projection. And at some point I kind of recognized that I was carrying this mantle of this energy, right? And so I was taking this concept from Ruiz and I started writing on Post-it notes, love and light. And I had them on my bathroom walls and I had them on my office walls. So if my mind started to wander, right, I'd see love and light and go, fine. No, it wasn't like the best attitude.
Right.
But I started to think about what this person had done, what could have been the alternative motives, what could have, right? And I what I found was, I had to engineer my outcome. And the outcome of anger and betrayal was low-hanging fruit. And where I wanted to be was at where the light was. And
The
so
high road.
I needed, every time I divert it, right, I kind of went to this place of, okay, has that person made a mistake? That person, right? And then I just kind of went to the place of, I just want to be full of light and love. And I'm just going to carry that within me. And where I'm at today is by my design. And it shifted something that was consuming me in a very short period of time by saturating myself with the new narrative. It took me to a very different place energetically.
Right.
And I've even had some recent experiences where I've just really, part of the struggle wasn't what happened to me. The struggle was a willingness to conceptualize it in a place that didn't consume me. And so like today where I'm at in my life, I have a lot of gratitude for. Getting there wasn't easy, but I'm grateful for that space because it's opened up opportunities.
Absolutely. It really does shift you, because I see it as, you took over the power. You empowered yourself, in a situation like that where you point fingers and you project and what's wrong with them, you're giving them the power, and your reaction is anger and betrayal and all of that. But you're doing that.
And it's automatic almost, right? It's
Right.
just easy to slip into that
So
thing because it's
easy.
been done so many times, right?
So easy. But then when you just kind of take a moment to just kind of rethink it, why am I using all this energy to get all mad and
Definitely.
upset?
Definitely.
They're out living their lives, they're happy, but I'm sitting here in disgust and anger and all of that, and I can't move on. So what can I do about that?
Right.
And if you can see yourself, kind of step out of that and kind of see yourself, that anger state, and you're like, that's not what I want to be. That's not who I am. That's not my true state. That's the beginning of making that shift. And when you enter in, love and light, at first you may not believe it. It may not sink in right away, but if you practice,
Give it a shot.
give it a
Yeah.
shot and
Yeah.
just keep doing it
Yeah.
whenever it shows up, and just remind yourself, it does shift.
Consistency.
Consistency.
But
Consistency.
if I may, I think that ability to pause, that, okay, here I go again, I'm going to pause. What are they going through? Maybe they're having a bad day, whatever. It's a shift. It's that shift that comes about, that ability to do it, and that's indicative of getting into a place of spirituality. That means that you're getting in touch with a true sense of spirituality within yourself. And you don't need a church to do it. You don't need the masses or the the advertising or whatever. You don't. You've done it in yourself, and this moment has come to you, and because of that ability, you're able to change your reaction and what you get from that. And I'm the exact same way. Even on the road, I'm having fake road rage with people because I'm making up stories like typing people. I was just so stupid, but it's so dumb. But it's so automatic in who I was, and now it's different. I'm like, okay, that's all right, Grandma. Take your time. I know you got the handicap sticker in the line. I get it. I know you're someone's grandma, and I respect that. Like, it's a different thing.
Let me push you.
But it is, right? But it is a shift, and I think it is. I think it is because I'm able to get into a better place of understanding of my spirituality, and I really believe it's because of the work that we're doing here.
Right.
I wouldn't have been able to do that type of shift if it wasn't for this.
Right. And this takes time. It takes practice. It takes consistency.
Yeah.
All of that. I just taught an intro to meditation class to our mindfully gay group, and we had some folks that were kind of new to this, and after each little exercise, I just asked, well, how was that for you? And some would, well, that was kind of hard, and I kept, I got distracted and all that. So, well, that's part of this. That is a part of this experience, this meditative experience. Meditation is not just about just clearing your mind and just being all zen, all at once at that moment. It takes practice. The effort in meditation, or the cycle, I guess, of meditation is starting over, starting
Simply
over.
begin again.
Begin
Yes.
again.
Yes.
Constantly, because you will get distracted.
I work with plant medicines, and a favorite little exercise I like to do And it's interesting on the medicine is to get to a space of no thought, right? Because we often identify our identity with thought. And I have found that when I'm able to like not have the thought, I get a sense of my spirit.
Yes, absolutely.
Now what's interesting is I'll be later and think, okay, I'm going to practice not having a thought. Oh, that's a thought.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll go like maybe 10 seconds and go, wow, I'm not having a thought. Shit, that's a thought. Right? It's a really challenging process, even with the tools. But getting there, right?
Allowing yourself to get
Yeah,
there.
allowing
Right, right.
and giving yourself permission
Fuck up,
to
yeah.
mess up.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, guaranteed. And so you just start again. And it's okay. That's part of the process. You just start again. That's all. That's it. No judgment around that. It's just part of the process. So if you're on this journey, like, I can't find spirituality, try again.
Give it time.
Give it time.
It's a supplement. We're supplementing. You have to give consistency with supplementation in order to get benefit. And that's a nutritional, that's an approach to nutritional supplementation, but it's certainly the same with
applies.
spiritual and this type of change that we're helping people with.
So we were just talking about the love and light kind of concept or seeing everything through the eyes of love. And what I love about, and maybe we can find some way of adding this to the podcast or maybe we read it or something, but the prayer that Ruiz gives at the end of the book is about this man who's sitting at the river and someone approaches him and recognizes that this man is carrying some special kind of energy. And the man takes his heart and takes the fire from his heart and puts it into the other person. And then that person begins to look at the world around him. He looks at the river, and the river is a message of love. He looks at the ocean and experiences the love from the ocean, and the trees and the earth. And I have, just being out in nature and just smoking my tobacco pipe, when I sit at a riverside or when I sit on the ground and really contemplate how amazing the synchronicity of nature is, how it works in this powerful synchronicity. Right, the trees are not consumed about trying to be more like the boulders.
Right, they don't care about the lights.
And one tree is not comparing. It's like, God, I just wish I could be skinny like the aspen.
Right.
Look at that pine. Ooh, he's hung.
Pining for pine, yeah.
Right. But that each creature, each being in nature is so perfectly aligned with its authentic self and purpose and right, and sometimes to recognize that we're part of nature and that our body is full of water and cells, and each cell is a living, we're a universe within ourselves, right, that somewhere we can find that energetic synchronicity and bring it into ourselves. And sometimes when I've been out in nature in those kind of settings, I just become so overwhelmed with the magic and the power that is there. And then for me, the discipline throughout my life has been, how do I bring and integrate those experiences into my relationships with others, in my love relationship, in my community that I'm with the clients that I work with, right? And so it's interesting, I think, often with clients, they come in with this long list of pathologies, and I'm just like, I look at you and I just see perfection. Victor Ruiz would say, everything in the world is perfect except for the stories we tell ourselves.
Oh my gosh, yes.
For sure. Yes.
And so I don't think clients take me seriously, but I have to explain it to them. It's like, no, everything about you is perfect. It's your opinion of that.
Wow.
And I think I'm able to go there, not just because of the spiritual work that I've done, but because of the emotional work that I've done. Like we were talking this morning, it's like, as much as I hesitate to lean into things, because who wants to go there? I've just learned that if I lean into it and get to the other side, it liberates a place of consciousness.
Absolutely.
And that is spirit.
That's
sure.
spirit. That's spirit. This reminds me of just, the platforms the three of us have. Your platform, working with medicine in your clinical office, and that what you can show people just with that statement. People are coming with their, problems and concerns, and you're seeing perfection and helping them to see that story and maybe starting to shift that story. That's a platform that you have. Nick, same thing. People are showing up deconditioned and out of shape and just feeling bad about their bodies and how they feel, and you're allowing them to show up as they are and guiding them on this path. I'm going to show you. I'm going to guide you without judgment, without putting on even more stories. Let's shift that story. I'm going to give you some new things to look at and venture into, to experiment with and play with, and so that you can see yourself differently.
You can start to appreciate yourself.
There you
As
go.
opposed to hate yourself.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel like my platform is standing on that yoga mat in front of my students. I don't get to always hear their stories, but I know they've got stories. And having them show up as they are on the yoga mat and just guiding them through these asanas, these postures, and really showing them, this is the fun part for me, is that, giving them the sense that you can do this.
Yeah.
Because I'll demonstrate something, they're like, oh no, John, I can't do
Yeah.
that. I can't
Yeah.
do that pose.
Yeah.
Watch.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you all the tips and tools and all the postures and breath work to lead you up to it. And soon enough, you're going to be able to do this pose. And it's so fun to hear. I mean, you hear it in class sometimes. People will go, I did it! just this celebratory expression. I did it! Because they didn't think they could.
But, I want to amplify something you just said. Because you talked about our platforms. And I know you both really well, and I know you both in those platforms. But what I know about those platforms is they're very much part of your own intimate journey. You're just not a yoga instructor, right? You fully encompass and explore the concepts of yoga and the implications in your life. That's why people like your classes. I think they experience you as knowledgeable, but they have an intimate experience because you bring the essence of who your engineered approach to this. And I know with Nick, his own intimate journey with fitness and nutrition then increases his capacity for empathy and connectedness.
Yeah.
And I know that every client he works with, he has a really deep connection with. And so I think when people work with Nick, they know that yeah, he's knowledgeable, but he also understands the struggle. And I often hear from people, and it's probably the best compliment I get from clients, is because I don't think I'm a profound technician of psychology, but clients will say, I can tell you've done your work. And I'm like, yes ma'am, yes sir, yes you, I have done my work.
Yeah.
You live the process that you're helping others to understand, and that's what we're all doing.
Yeah.
And
And then we dare to bring it online. Well, and I think that's a great segue too, because I think we have to keep reminding people that I am an expert in me and my lived experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And we talked about this at the very beginning, that this needed to be about the intimacy of our experience and not some exercise in academia or history, but just who we are and how we show up in the world.
Yeah.
And with the belief that, yes, we're unique, but I think relatable. I mean, I can think of a dozen people who should be sitting here. And I know the listeners that we've heard from feel like they're just sitting in the room with us having this conversation.
Right.
Because it's speaking to their spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's wakening something up for them as well.
It's an invitation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, what do you think, gentlemen? Have we wrapped it up?
What's next?
Yeah, what's next? What's next on this
The
journey?
next level.
This has been fascinating. This conversation, and I like that we did this series and starting with the physical and talked about mental and finishing with spiritual, because I think even in the topics, I've kind of had this spiritual revelation.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
feel more open and alive and like, oh, I learned something, and I'm hoping our listeners did too, and just listening to this series. And like we keep saying, we want to hear from you. Join this conversation. We want to hear your story. If there's parts of your storyline that are holding you back, and you are curious about stepping into something new, and you've been listening to this podcast, let us know. Send us an email, hit us up on social media. If you're in Salt Lake City or in the Utah area somewhere and can show up to one of our events, show up. We want to see you, want to meet you, get involved in this. And because we see that as a part of that step forward towards your authenticity, who you are, how you show up in the world, and be, this mindfully gay person. Any last words, guys?
Come practice with us. Yeah. It's a very I love the way that you said all of that. And I think it's appealing to hear it. It's also frightening to do it, right? To take the first step. And that's exactly what these meetings are that we're having, whatever the format is, whatever the topic or the yoga or it's books or what, it's an opportunity to come and practice. It's to take those first steps together, to get outside of your comfort zone, like you're saying, maybe I'm a book reader, maybe I'm a game player, maybe I'm a yoga practitioner, whatever it may be, try this different and start to understand your space in this world with others that are doing the same thing. Because there's no it's come and try something and maybe it's not for you. It's not a failure. It's just you taking some steps to better understand your authentic self.
Yes, love that.
In the Sweat Lodge, we often use this term. It's spoken as ho mitakuyasan, meaning to all my relations. It's a lot more complex than that, but to break it down, it means to all my relations. And what that means is, in the grand scheme of things, earth, water, mineral, nature, each other, we're all intimately connected. It's not a hierarchy, it's a circle. And we're all related. And so to say, to all my relations, is this acknowledgement that we're part of this beautiful schema of life. And then I always enjoy, I'll let you do it, but I always enjoy the namaste concept. And maybe you can take us out with a namaste.
Sure, yeah. It's the same idea, namaste, we say that typically at the end of each of our yoga classes. And sometimes it's not, explained what that means even. And my interpretation, and this is what I was taught, but I believe this, was it's an acknowledgement. It's an acknowledgement of the beings and spirits in your presence. It's saying something like, I see, or the light in me sees the light in you.
That's nice.
The light in me sees the light in you.
That is so what these groups are about. That is exactly it. I love that.
And then at the end of a session with Nick, it's like, enough.
Are you bleeding yet, Jerry? Not yet? All right. Namaste.
We're done.
Well, that closes us out, you guys. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the next episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast.
That's all for today's episode on spiritual fitness. Thank you for joining us.
Don't forget to visit our website at www.mindfullygay.com. We love hearing from you, so please send us your ideas and thoughts.
And if you have a story to share, we encourage you to reach out. Your experiences can inspire and support others in our community.
Share your journey and help us enrich the conversation. Until next time, keep embracing your true self.